All right, guys, welcome to another podcast. This one's a little close to my heart. I just want to, before we get into it, it's good to be back. I've been away for a couple weeks on holidays. Thank you.
Yes,
Brian, Mason, what have I missed? What's changed in the industry? What am I behind on? Update me.
We laughed, we cried.
Oh,
the Kemper released a new pedal amp thing. There's a lot. I mean, I fanboyed a lot over Nigel a couple weeks ago, or girl, or whatever you want to call it.
I remember that. I was there for that, and I was enjoying it. I was enjoying being a passenger in that vehicle. And speaking of vehicles, I mean, we're still in the Miata today, and this kind of relates to actually something I was thinking about before the podcast started today. We have not bought, metaphorically speaking, a new car. We have had the Miata since the beginning. It has served us well and will continue to serve us well for as long as we want to keep this little story metaphor going. I'm personally happy with the Miata, and this relates to what we're chatting about today, which is essentially our buying habits when it comes to gear, specifically pedals, and how this is probably less to do with just pedals and just us human beings in general. We like new shiny things. But what we're going to do today is we are going to look at the best selling effects pedals as per Reverb.com for 2022 and 2023. And then we're going to throw in a few extras there. But really what we want to get to is what makes for gear pedals that will last beyond the year of their release. Mm-hmm. Things that we're going to refer to today as pedals that have staying power, pedals that you are going to love in 5 years, in 10 years. And what we're going to see is some of the top pedals on these lists were made, 40, 50 years ago, which is crazy. And they're still top sellers today. And so we're going to get into that. And then I'm going to ask you guys later in the episode what you believe makes for a pedal that has staying power. And we're going to kind of chat on that a bit. So that's the episode today. Mason, any thoughts before we dive head first into this topic?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that this list will hopefully reveal to some of us will demonstrate how some of us have some bad behavior. We've been bad boys and girls as it relates to some of our pedal choices, and that we are completely owned by the sort of transient nature of whatever is hot at the moment, and we're all in, and then come next year, those pedals are dead to us, and we're on to the next bright and shiny thing. And so maybe today will be a little bit of a wake-up call. It's like seeing yourself on camera, and then you realize, oh, that's how I sound. Or that's what I looked like there. I thought I looked amazing, but in fact, my shirt was untucked and I had lettuce in my teeth. So today is going to be a realization that you had some romaine lettuce still in your teeth as it relates to pedals. And maybe this will help you sort of become more honest with yourself about the things that actually really work for you, instead of being taken by the trends of the moment and swept away in them. So that's my hope for today, is a reality check for all.
And I think you guys might be able to relate to this, Brian, probably more than me or Mason. But when I'm chatting to customers, when we're talking through custom setup stuff, and they're like, yeah, I want to invest in a good setup. I'm going to keep this one the way it is for the next 2 to 3 years. I would venture a guess that the amount of times I hear that, which is most phone calls, versus the amount of times it's actually true, is probably less than 10%, probably below 5% of people that actually keep their boards that way. But I think it points to the fact that the dream scenario is we want consistent pedal boards. We want to buy a piece of gear and have it still be relevant to us, to have us still enjoy it in like I was saying before, years to come. And it's just not always the case. And I don't think the gear is the problem. I think the problem often relies to us, as Mason mentioned. You didn't use the word naughty, Mason, but just being past Christmas, I mean, we want to get off the naughty gear list and be people that stick with stick with our gear. So maybe next episode you can be dressed up as Santa and you can say who is on the naughty and who is on the nice list.
Let's do it.
I'm personally, I would be up for seeing that. I don't know if anyone else would, but let's get into it. Let's get into the best-selling effects list of 2022. I'll share my screen in just a second. Reverb has basically, there's a whole bunch of stuff I won't go through, but essentially what they're saying is Reverb will bump releases. They'll get behind it, they'll put their marketing behind it, and they will push releases in front of their audience. Those releases are not included in any of these lists. So it's basically across used, I believe, used and new pedals, and it's basically their best-selling list. They also have a best list of that year. So of 2022 will be our first year, or our first list here of pedals that were released in the same year. So there's two lists here. We'll probably breeze past the one that was the list that was released in 2022, and we'll just go to best selling. But just wanted to give you kind of some of the conditions before we get into it. So let me share my screen.
Can I just make one quick interjection here, Grant?
I see that hand, Mason.
Thank you. So just for people that are looking at this list, the one thing that you should just sort of temper your understandings of it with is that there are brands that do not allow dealers to sell on Reverb. So Chairmen, for example, does not allow dealers to sell new on these sites. And this is true of many places. So you will find that sometimes, or maybe just exclusive dealers, like we have select dealers that we allow to sell on Reverb for Vertex because we don't sell on Reverb. Those typically will not be reflected on this list, even though Chairmen we know is ubiquitous and almost everybody owns one. So sometimes this list is skewed toward brands that really try to push Reverb as a way to buy their product. So just keep that in mind as you look down this list.
Let's do this. You guys got my screen okay over there?
I see it. And I remember it from last year. Best-selling effects
fair enough.
2022. Yeah.
Fair enough. So we are on reverb.com. The link will be in the show notes for these pages as well. And that's a very good point, Mason, because I wasn't aware of that. That didn't cross my mind about the what brands actually are in here. Some of the ones, if you're listening right now, just to, again, go really quickly through the top selling new releases. This first one is the exclusives that were not included in the list because Reverb got behind them. The most notable being the fart pedal.
I
know this is on everyone's board. The fart pedal is a real pedal and it does exactly what it sounds like. So we'll just keep moving on because I feel like I've said enough there. Best selling pedals released in 2022. So brand new pedals in 2022. Really quick at the top of the list was the Chase Bliss Habit. That's kind of a delay style pedal. You can't really definitively say anything Chase Bliss makes is simply a delay or simply a reverb. There's always some extra glitchy, unique aspects to it. So it's cool. So Habit tops the list in 2022 for a brand new pedal. And then we go down to the Special Cranker, the DL4 Mark II, which I was excited about. But again, I don't know about you guys. I haven't really seen it on boards that have come through the shop. If so, very rarely, and definitely not in the last 6 months of 2023. So for me, at least, that one has not been one that has stuck around. The Halo Andy Timmons Dual Echo, the Dream by Universal Audio, the RE202 by Boss, which was one I was very excited about, but again, I haven't seen much of. Poly Blue Octave by MXR, Duke of Tone by MXR, which is obviously a King of Tone kind of copy by MXR, or maybe not copy, maybe a collaboration would be a better word.
Yeah.
The RE2, the little brother of the 202 Space Echo. Then we have the M1 Modulation Machine by Walrus, the Universal Audio Ruby, which is another amp simulator similar to the Dream, but based on a Vox. The JHS Overdrive / Preamp. And then we go through the last 7 or so. We have some more Walrus, Death by Audio, Source Audio Zeo, which is kind of a preamp boost. And then we have there's a jam pedals in there, Soldano Slow, Lore by Walrus, the Nux or Nukes. How do you say that one, guys?
New
Any
X.
comments there? New X, which is Amp Academy. They're kind of amp sim all in one. Again, one that I've not seen very much. And then we have the Wampler Moxie, which is kind of like a TS9 derivative in a mini pedal format at number 20. So that was 2022. I mean,
man. I mean, the only one I recognize is like the Ruby as being something that's like still on pedal boards.
Well, the Dream, I feel like Dream and Ruby, people bought these up in the combo to have both options. Because if you're, I mean, you've probably heard of these, but just as a reminder for the listener, these are 1 amp style per unit. So it's not a, buy an amp sim and you get Fender, you get Vox, Marshall, you get it all in one box. You are buying a Fender style amp. And the Ruby, you're buying a Vox style amp. Mm-hmm. And so people bought these up in pairs a lot. And I still see these on boards quite a bit in the pair. The big issue being that if you run them in parallel, so at the same time, if you run them in parallel, you get phase issues, and then you have to correct that with another piece of gear. And so I have seen people favor the Dream, myself included. Even though I'm a Vox guy, the Dream, I feel like it just works. It's a little more friendly to just get a sound quickly. The Ruby, you have to work for it a bit more. Still sounds great, but it's harder work. I feel
it's
like
brighter.
To get that Ruby work, and
it's a lot brighter. It's a little not. Harsh is a harsh word to say, but it's like that's like the Dream. I even have one in my demo rack thing, and it's the Dream because there's just something about that. It's easy to get the tweakability right. With a Ruby, you really like you have all those extra little secondary features that you kind of have to mess with. So I can understand that.
My main thought here, and this is humbling to say out loud, but I'm curious what you guys think. Most of these pedals being top sellers, at least on Reverb, and with the conditions that Mason had mentioned earlier, most of these pedals I do not see on pedal boards. And it makes me think maybe the people that are spending, maybe the majority, the people that are getting these pedals are not the type of people to pay for a professional setup. And that's neither good nor bad. It's just what I'm seeing, which the humbling part for me is maybe I don't have my finger on the pulse of the industry like I think I do. Maybe I more have it my finger on the pulse of a very niche area of the market of people that will typically want to get a setup done. And so looking at this list is really interesting for me because I would say the type of pedals I would see on a pedal board would be Habit, the Andy Timmons Dual Echo by Keeley, Dream, Ruby. I'm going down the list here. Those would be honestly the main ones. Maybe the Zeo by Source Audio. Jam pedals I'm seeing more and more of lately, but that's about it. I don't see much Wampler. I don't see much of the bigger Boss pedals. The MXR stuff I don't see a ton of, although every once in a while. It's a very select few pedal brands that stand out on the setups that I see. And it's just interesting to note that some of the best sellers are not the best sellers for my customers. And so it's interesting to think, what to recommend. And I'm curious what you guys think. If you'd have a similar experience, or Mason's already alluded to the fact that you don't see too many of these either, or not maybe as familiar with too many of these. What do you guys think about maybe my take specifically, but if you agree, our take specifically being more cornered to a more niche part of the market?
If I can chime in, it's funny. Half of these pedals on the list, so 10, I counted, I consistently get on boards. So, the Habit is one. The Andy Timmons Dual Echo, I do. Which I've recommended MIDI to them a couple of times. I hear a lot of people say that if it had MIDI, kind of, that thing. I get the Dream and the Ruby a lot. I get that a lot, or not silly, but funny enough, I either get people saying, "Oh yeah, the Dream and Ruby take up too much space, so put 2 tone X's on instead," which doesn't logically make any sense because they're significantly different sizes. But so I get those two. I get the Duke of Tone a lot. I get the Mako M1 for Walrus a lot as well.
Yeah.
The JHS Overdrive preamp, I think in the original launch of the pedal, everyone bought it up so quickly because it was, I don't know what it was based off of. They all bought the bigger box one.
The DoD,
there's two different, the big old one, which I've never seen. I've never even seen it in person. But we have them here. Not the big box, the smaller one. The Slotfa and the Lore I've seen on smaller acoustic boards. So actually 11 technically. The Zeo I've seen on, that is actually a very common one I get asked about pretty consecutively. And I think it has a lot to do with the size of it is very compact. And it's just, it can do a bunch of different, it depends on how you route it and like where you want to put it in the chain. So I'll get that one a lot. I actually, it's funny, I just put that delay on a board this past week. First time I've ever seen that pedal. So, but yeah, so Wampler, the New X, Death by Audio, like those are ones I don't see often. And the Boss stuff, I mean, I did maybe one RE202 once for a guy and it didn't stay long because it's just very big. So yeah, at least for me, at least 10 to 11 of these I see pretty consistently. And it's not them buying them from the store and bringing them back here, it's them coming in with them. But the typical Chase Bliss, Strymon, like all those bigger ones, those are obviously the ones I see most. But yeah, the Habit I have seen a lot, which is interesting because it's a very unique pedal.
Yeah. Yeah. Very unique. I feel like I say this about Chase Bliss all the time. I absolutely love what they do, but I feel like I'm not creative enough to use them because they're just out of my comfort zone. I'd actually be very curious to get Joel on the show at some point if he was keen and chat through Chase Bliss as a company, because it's just such a unique approach to this to the effects world and a good addition, obviously.
Yeah.
Mason, any thoughts on these pedals and how often you see or don't see them?
Yeah, well, I think Brian's probably the best representation from like a board building standpoint because he does so many boards and also is in a guitar shop. But from my perspective, I would say like the Dream, the Ruby, the Andy Timmons, the Duke of Tone, those are ones that I saw quite regularly, because I'm in sort of that into the studio guitar players thing, and the Soldano SLO is kind of an important amp historically in that scene. I do see those amongst kind of players that I know. But again, just being in touch with a lot of guitar players, I mean, the thing that's interesting to me, just as sort of an overview of this list, even though it's a year old, is that the things that I think and I know sell the most, like Boss is going to have sold a lot more pedals than all these. MXR is going to have sold a lot more pedals than everything else on this list. Because they're just designed by the way that the brand is structured to sell tens of thousands of pedals. I'm confident that a lot of these have not sold tens of thousands, in their totals, because the brands are just not set up for that. So what you're seeing is sort of a cross section of somebody who is, Gen Z, millennial, age people that typically use Reverb a lot, that buy from Reverb a lot. You're probably not seeing the boomers buying from here, even though the boomers spend a lot of money on gear. You're seeing sort of a specific type of person that's looking for a specific type of pedal. Like Grant said, Chase Bliss they're amazingly built and really creative. They also appeal to a very specific group of people. Now, albeit those are very loyal people, but just by way of the fact that that's the number one best selling, it kind of tells you a lot of what you need to know about Reverb, the type of person that's buying on Reverb. And so it's not necessarily emblematic of the industry at large. It's emblematic of this specific area of the industry. And that's okay. I think that most people recognize that. I think people have a good enough sense. And we're just offering some counterpoint to that, and based on our experience on the professional side of things, And it'll be interesting to see when we transition over to the next list to see how much this still holds water, and how much this has changed.
I do want to get to that next list, but I want to throw to you, Mason, to do some of our ads and talk about our sponsors that make the show possible.
I will do that. And I'd love to talk to you first about our friends over at the Guitar Sanctuary. They are the Dallas-Fort Worth area's premier guitar shop that not only sell amazing guitars, they also have amazing amps. They have a range of amazing pedals, whether you're looking for the mainstream brands or the boutique. Many of the products with which you saw on that top 10 list from last year on Reverb.com exist within the Guitar Sanctuary. And they have amazing service, amazing staff that are all knowledgeable. So I highly recommend that you check out our friends over at theguitarsanctuary.com. You can see their offerings online or head into the store and check out the gear yourself. Secondly, I'd like to talk about our friends over at the Sweetwater Gear Exchange. Sweetwater, a few years ago, launched a program called the Gear Exchange, which allows you to buy and sell your used gear on Sweetwater. And not only do you get to buy and sell to their community, but if you'd like to be able to maintain the full profits from your sales of your used gear, they offer that option where you don't pay any fees whatsoever so long as you decide to put your earnings on a Sweetwater gift card. And if you're somebody like me who's routinely buying new things from Sweetwater all the time, this is a great way to keep all of your profits and being able to maximize the things that you're buying after the sale. So go over to sweetwater.com/use, check out their site, set up an account for free, get buying and get selling. Lastly, I would like to talk about our friends over at Neural DSP and their amazing plugins. And they just had a brand new release where they have collaborated with Joe Morgan of Morgan Amplification, and they have released a whole suite of brand new amp models in addition to effects. You can check all those out over on neuraldsp.com. And if you are a person that would like to buy one of their amazing plugins, whether it be a classic like a Soldano SLO or the Pliny plugin or the Tosin Abasi plugin or the Corey Wong plugin, our listeners can do that. They get 30% off any plugins of their choosing, the only exception being brand new plugins like the Joe Morgan suite. Those will be available after 90 days, and they will still be applicable for the same discount code. Use the coupon code Chairmen, CHAIRMEN, and get 30% off site-wide, again, minus anything that is newly released, and then those will be available after 90 days. Head over to our friends at neuraldsp.com. Now, back to you, Grant.
Thanks, Mason. So let's get into the 2023 list. I'm going to share my screen again here. For those of you that are on YouTube, if you want to see what we're talking about, check out the Chairman of the Boards on YouTube. And if you're listening, we are going to use some descriptive words here. So it's like you're watching. It's almost like you are in my screen right now. We are going to the best selling pedals and amps, but we're going to focus on pedals of 2023 on reverb.com. So again, they start the list with best-selling pedals released in 2023. So some of the key takeaways or the key pedals here at the top of the list for released in 2023. We'll go through these quickly because this is not the focus, but we have the Strymon Cloudburst. This was the first pedal in there. I don't know what you call this size that Strymon is now going for, but smaller than the L cap, a third of the size, I would say, of the L cap. We have the Strymon Cloudburst. Below that, JHS and EHX did a collaboration on the Lizard Queen Octave Fuzz at number 2. Earthquaker did White Light Legacy, which is an overdrive. EHX did a Slapback Echo reissue. Excuse me. Karma did an ODR 10, kind of in a Nobles kind of style take of a pedal. That's number 5. Keeley Super AT Mod, Andy Timmons OD. Fender Shields Blender. This is one I have coming, and I am excited to try it. It's a gigantic fuzz octave blender. I am so pumped to actually see this, but I have never had it on a board, never seen it in person yet. Excited for that one. Wampler's Germanium Tumnus, which is a clone, but with the updated or new diodes. Strobo Stomp Mini by Peterson. And then lastly, we have the EHX Walking on the Moon Andy Summers signature. Just when you thought a pedal name could not get any longer, we have EHX rounding out the list at number 10. So those are the top released on Reverb for 2023.
Well, firstly, I guess I need to eat my words, because I said that Strymon didn't do Reverb releases, or they didn't allow companies to sell on Reverb. And I guess they changed that for this last year. They changed that policy, because I remember formerly, because we had the ability to buy some of their products at artist pricing or at dealer pricing when we were building more pedal boards. And so I would get like their mailers, that they'd send to dealers. And there would always be all these restrictions about, no third party selling, can't sell on Amazon, can't sell on, and that's standard fare. But it looks like maybe they've seen Tone Jesus and they know that they need to sell on Reverb. I don't know. But anyway, just wanted to correct myself there.
I mean, it's not surprising that the Cloudburst is number one, honestly.
Yep.
I've seen it on so many boards. It's because, and people are like, oh, I think it was the first, when something comes out, everyone's like, wow, this is amazing. And then they start thinking of all the negative stuff. Everyone was like, oh, this is amazing. But wait, that's stupid. Why would they just put one of the algorithms in the pedal? Because it's a great algorithm, but it can also be used in so many different ways with the ensemble mode. So it's definitely my favorite of their newer series. I'm begging for them to come out with a Flint size of this one, or like an Iridium size of this one. And just the Reverb. Fact that just Reverb, or I've always loved the Flint Reverb, and I've always said as soon as the Flint, as soon as the Flint comes out with MIDI, I would get the Flint with MIDI. So, and now it's come out. But the fact that this one also works with their new Nixie software is awesome.
And the one I was surprised not to see on the list was Brig, the other version of this.
That's the one that I see everybody using in my world.
Yeah. So it's a decent list. I was trying to think of some of the other things that were not on here. The new Boss one, the DM101 wasn't on there. There's a few of these things. Maris LVX or Maris Mercury X. Sorry, LVX was last year, I believe. There's a few on here I was surprised not to see.
When did this come out?
And a few that I was surprised to see. Sorry.
When did this come out? When did this article? Or this?
Oh, that's a great question.
The last week or two, or
wow, that's shocking.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see some of the stuff that does and does not make it. But again, I think Mason's point on maybe who uses Reverb is not a fair snapshot of the industry of guitar players as a whole.
Yeah,
but maybe more a unique subset. So it's interesting. But I was happy to see Peterson on there. I think they do some great stuff and well deserved to have some of that, have their stuff on the list. But let's get down into the top 20 across Reverb, whether it was released or not in 2023. And one thing I have here on my notes off screen are the dates that these pedals were initially released. And you may or may not be surprised to know that only one pedal on this list was released in 2023. Everything else was released before that, which kind of made me happy, I'm going to be honest, because it kind of shows that maybe people are being a little bit more loyal to older pedals that just get the job done. I could be reading into that completely wrong, but that's what I'm going to choose to believe until you guys disagree with me or make a better point for that in the comments. But I'll give you the year as I quickly go through this list, and then we'll give thoughts. I'll give you the year that the pedal was released. Starting out at number 1, if you're listening, is the Boss DS1, originally released, and this is the oldest pedal on the list, in 1978. Wow. So still a top seller on Reverb. What is that? We're coming close to 40, 50 years later. We're in the mid 40s. And it's number 1 on Reverb's list as the best selling pedal. That's impressive.
That is.
And I guess that's the oldest pedal. It gets less impressive from there, but still we got some good dates to talk about.
That's number 1, man. Tone Jesus loves 2K, loves that frequency.
And so we have an overdrive at number 1. And I'll say the other thing is it's an affordable overdrive at number 1. So it's not a boutique $500 overdrive pedal. It's something that the common man can get their hands on and use. And then we go down to the Blues Driver, the BD2, which was released in 1995. The Compressor Plus was 2017 by Keeley.
Wow.
HX Stomp. I don't know about you guys. I was happy to see this on the list because multi-effects units typically, and prove me wrong, I love a spicy chat here, but prove me wrong, multi-effects units typically don't have a long shelf life just because of software, computers, chips always getting faster and better and needing to be updated. Yeah. And so the shelf life for these typically, a few years and then you're on to the next thing. But I think what's cool about the HX Stomp is right out of the gate, they've done a bunch of software updates, obviously, since it was released. But out of the gate, it was a great unit. The amp and cab sim was awesome. Tons of hardware features that you can't update with software. They thought it through well with the effects loops, with the balanced outputs if you want them, stereo wherever you need it, like all sorts of things, parallel routing. Like they thought it through well. And it's cool to see there's still a loyal following for the HX Stomp, which we know from setups and seeing posts and all that. But I was happy to see the HX Stomp on there. I don't know if you guys would call me crazy for that, but
no, I think it's great. Stance. I think it's great.
It's a good pedal. One that I was very pleasantly surprised when we first got it. I think I got it on the release. So I was an early adopter for the HX Stomp. The amp and cab sim on it is truly great and was great even back then. It's still very relevant today. So HX Stomp, I'm a fan of. Even though there are better delay and reverb algorithms out there in my mind, it is a pedal that gets the job done and does it well. And then after that, we have the TU3, which is the Boss tuner. Originally, the TU2 came out in 1998, TU3 in 2009. HX Stomp, was 2018. I should say that. Brian just put a Boss tuner on screen there.
It was a TU2. I've had it forever.
There you go. Again, I think as Mason has said in the past, the things that will be left after the apocalypse, cockroaches and Boss pedals. The tuner, it just never dies. It's an impressive unit. Like you stand on that thing, you jump on it, you spill a beer or a triple filtered water. If you're Brian, that thing will just keep on ticking.
My gosh.
It's a great pedal. So the TU2 there. Cloudburst is our only pedal of 2023 on this list by Strymon, which we just chatted about. Carbon Copy originally came out in 2008. Proco Rat 2 originally out in 1988. So pre-2000s. Digitech Drop 2014. Hologram Microcosm. I was a little surprised to see this one on the list.
Yeah.
Just because, not because it's not a great unit, just because it's a very niche.
Unique.
I don't want to say specific. Unique is a good word. It's not the every player pedal. I love Hologram and what they're doing, but in my mind, they're more in the realm of Chase Bliss. Of they have a really unique, fun take on what they do. But I'm surprised to see more of a mass appeal. Again, this could be a Reverb.com niche type thing that we were talking about before, but I was surprised to see that one there pleasantly. Iridium came out in 2019. Boss SD1, 1981. That is older than I am. The Greer Lightspeed. I love Greer. I love what they do. Very happy to see the Lightspeed on the list. It is just a great overdrive pedal.
This is so far the only overdrive pedal on this list that I'm like, this is it. It sounds great. It works with almost everything, and yeah, I think well deserved. I think of overdrives that have come out in the last 5 years. To me, this is the best sounding of them.
And this would be supported by what I see on setups personally as well. I see a Lightspeed a lot. And,
what's crazy is I see this pedal all the time. I have never owned one, but it is absolutely amazing. Yeah, I need to go buy one just because
time to get on that train.
I've been saying I need to buy one, and then I get them through on setups, and I'm like, dang it, I need to go buy one. So it's one of those pedals I've probably seen for the past. When did the Lightspeed come out? This is organic. Is this
probably
Lightspeed was 2014?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nicely done. Yep.
Makes sense. Yeah. But yeah, it's an amazing overdrive.
Yep. Strymon Big Sky. We'll get to this later in the episode when we talk about staying power. I don't know how they made a multi-effects, or let's say a digital version of a reverb with multiple different algorithms 10, almost 11 years ago now, and it is still a top sell. Like, how do you do that? And that's the code that you need to crack as a manufacturer. That is impressive. And so a very great unit. It's big, but it does a whole lot, and they've made a relevant product 10 years later. Ibanez TS9, if you haven't heard about that, turn off the podcast now and pick up a new hobby. That was made in 1982. Just kidding. The Ibanez TS9 is just, if you're thinking about pedals, this is the first one you should go out and buy, arguably before a tuner. Get a TS9 and play out a tune if you have to. That is an awesome pedal you need to get. The Dunlop GC B95 Wah came out in 1982, same year as the TS9.
Number 16, all right.
The Ditto Looper was in 2013. Again, 10 years later, it is still on a bestseller list. Very impressive by TC Electronics. Morning Glory V1 came out in 2007. V4, which is on the list, the Morning Glory V4 is what is actually on the list,
like
came out in
old.
2016.
Yeah.
2016 it came out. And then we have two more left here, and then we'll chat about this. We have the UA Universal Audio Dream at 19. That came out middle of last year, 2022. Last on the list, this pedal came out in 1981. A few 1981s for Boss here. They had a good year. Before I say the pedal, this one, 1981, Boss SD1 in 1981, and I'm sure there were others, but both of those on the list. This is the GE7, the EQ is rounding out our list, number 20 on reverb.com. What do you guys think of the list? Anything that absolutely shocked you that it's hard to get the words out? Or was this more predictable?
I feel like the only one they got the first one wrong. I think the number one best selling 2023 is definitely your jokes today, because they're really good.
Are they on point?
They're on point. I'm just saying. That's
now that we're in 2024, Brian, maybe we need to talk about how I'm starting the year strong. But now I'm going to feel the pressure. I'm going to clam up, and I won't be able to come up with anything.
Oh, man. No,
it's a good. Yeah. I feel like it's a pretty good list overall. Yeah. I don't know if you guys would take anything off if you could.
Well, the data is the data. I think I just agree that the hologram, the microcosm, just seems like very so niche. I would almost, and I'm not equating this to the fart pedal, but it would be as though seeing the fart pedal on there. Honestly, it's just so specific, and you really have to own it, figuratively and metaphorically, to get away with it. So that's the only one I'm surprised about. I think that this seems fairly accurate. To me, I mean, it's no surprise that Boss dominates that list.
But the thing I found odd was that Boss dominates the list, yes, but not with anything that they have released in the last, just quickly scanning the list. Like, all of their pedals are pre-2000s on this list.
I wonder if the Waza is lumped in with this, or if they treat that differently. That might be an interesting
It's probably
question.
different.
Yeah, I would hope
it's probably different, yeah.
I mean, you don't see as many 200, like their 200s and 500 series. Like, you see them on stuff, and, they're a little bit more tricky to navigate, I think, compared to some other multi-effect or multi-delay like the Timeline and the Big Sky. Yes, they are dual engines and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I see more older GE7, DS1, the Blues Driver 2, like Andy has multiple. When I went over his house one day, he has like those like wired racks. Like, I have a wired rack here that I keep all my builds on. He has like 3 of those in his house, and like three shelves were just different Blues Drivers throughout the years.
No way.
Modded, JHS modded, Keeley modded. There's all these different types, and like that was like, I was like, man, like why is that one so special? He's like, there's just something about this Blues Driver. It's very, like, when I see one, I'll pick it up, and it's very noticeable. That one in the GE7, I know Mason, I think do you have the GE7?
I have a couple of them. Yeah, they're great. And the BD2 is if I'm thinking of it right, and it's been a while, but I'm pretty sure it's like it's one of the few like it's one of the few kind of popular overdrives out there that's Class A. So it's not using an op amp. Everything is discrete, and it's interesting. It's interesting design wise for that purpose, especially for the time. And yeah, I think the Keeley Fat Mod improves it a lot. You know, an equivalent that you can get from Robert Keeley out of the box is I think it's called the Fat Mod, or there's an Andy Timmons version now that is, you know, not a blues driver, but is a Keeley branded that I think is similar. But yeah, I think that those are cool pedals. I think a Strat in the 2 or 4 position with the BD2 is a really cool sound. And used by John Mayer during kind of the trio era. There's some cool sounds there. His was the Keeley modded one, but yeah, I mean, I think that this list to me seems much more real, like in touch than the individual year ones that are just for releases from that year. You know, it's not perfect as far as like the world that I see, but you know, again, we've talked about the cross sections of all these different you know, types of people that are already buying on Reverb, that are likely to buy on Reverb, and then restrictions from certain brands from selling on Reverb, so that kind of limits the pool. But you know, I'm not you know, disgruntled with this list, I'll say. But yeah, that's where I am.
One of the things I wanted to chat about, as I just kind of get to it on my screen here, is some of the pedals for 2023 that were not included, some of which we've already brought up. But I want to go through a few of these ones that I could think of and see if you guys have any that you can think of, you know, after I give you a sec to scan your memories here. But some of the pedals that were not included were the Tone X by AK Multimedia, amp and cab sim, built-in effects, apps, all that sort of thing. The whole environment, if you get the Tone X. But that is one I see on a lot of boards. Did not see it on this list. The Boss SDE 3000 and the EVH version, the RV200 and the 200 series pedals by Boss, which are great. The DM101 I mentioned by Boss, the analog kind of multi-delay thing they did. Anything by Diamond Pedals, they had the re-release this earlier this year. Nothing from Ross Pedals, nothing from Maris, the Mercury X, the LVX. The one that surprised me quite a bit, actually, and this may just be a Reverb thing, was the Universal pedals, the Max Pre, the Delverb, and the Galaxy. Nowhere to be seen. The Strymon Brig I mentioned. Anything from Origin. So they had the Halcyon Green, the Gold, the MEQ driver, the DCX boost. None of that was on. I love Origin stuff, so I was a little disappointed to not see that. Yeah. And then nothing from Eventide, lastly. So H90 wasn't on there, which was released late last year. Yeah. And that was not on the list.
I think,
so it's just interesting.
I think it's more of a consequence of just of not of what it is that they sell or how many they sell. I think that the bummer about this is that it maybe gives people a warped perception, you know, like a lot of these brands that you mentioned are in Sweetwater, you know, Eventide, Origin. Just by a function of being in Sweetwater, you're already selling thousands, if not tens of thousands, just on a release, just one of those. You know, and so if they have 3 releases a year, you know, that could very easily be 30,000 plus, you know, even for any of those brands. And so that's not representative. If you sold 30,000 units on Reverb, I would think that you would be in a pretty high spot on that list.
Yes.
So, you know, again, I think, I don't think Reverb's intent is to do that, is to like sort of warp the perception of the industry, but I think consequentially it does because other places don't put out those sorts of numbers. So, you know, just I think be mindful that's one list, but not the list.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that, they didn't release all the data. It wasn't a 1, 2, 3, 4 go through the whole list, but there was a list of Sweetwater's best-selling pedals of all time.
Oh, nice.
If you guys haven't seen this list, I want you to take a guess about what the top selling pedal was. And I promise you will not get it. Any thoughts on what it could be? Number one, all-time best-selling pedals on sweetwater.com.
This is the one that Josh Scott had done, right? Okay. Well, I know because I think I watched at least part of that video.
Yeah.
So I'll refrain to give Brian an opportunity to interject.
Of all
best-selling pedal of all time.
Golly.
At Sweetwater.
And
they've been around since the 70s.
Yeah, so we got a 50-plus year history here to go back on.
And a hint, it's not the fart pedal.
It's also not Boss.
Okay. That makes me,
in a way, though, it is.
Yeah, in a way it kind of is. Yeah, in a way it kind of is. It's a clone of a Boss, which Boss cloned of another pedal. And
oh, really?
Yeah.
Figuratively.
You want me just to tell you?
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, I was going to guess the Polytune or something like that because that seems to be a very common pedal, but what is it?
It's the Behringer SF300 Super Fuzz.
Really?
Yeah, which was basically a clone of a Boss, which was a clone of a Univox Super Fuzz.
Oh, wow.
And so that's a $29 pedal. I checked. I went to Reverb. I was like, how much does this thing cost? And so I've ordered one now while I was researching for the podcast because I want to hear this thing in person if it's the best-selling pedal on Sweetwater. $29, like as of today, first day of 2024, or second day of 2024, whatever it is today. And yeah, it's that. Number 8 was the Proco Rat for Sweetwater. 12 was the DS1 by Boss. 14, I thought this would be higher. 14 was the TS9. And so it was interesting. So it was, again, that one's not on the Reverb list, but still curious to see. So what I want to do, guys, I want to break, Brian, I'll throw to you in a sec for our last ad break, talking about some of our sponsors. And then after that, I want to talk a bit about staying power. I'm very curious of your guys' thoughts on what makes some of these pedals stick around for decades at a time. Before we do that, Brian, why don't you tell us about a few of our sponsors?
Thank you. Yeah. So our first of the last 3 sponsors is going to be Mono Creators. We talk about them every single week, and we love them because they're great. And they make high quality boards, gig bags, pedalboard bags, different guitar cases. They make compact ones that can connect to the guitar bags and everything, as well as power supplies. So they have a discount code Chairmen, CHAIRMEN, for 10% off. Check them out. I highly recommend Mono. They have a flat style, like carbon fiber. I can't remember what exactly it is. They have an angled series pedalboard that they actually just released this past 2023. So check them out. Use the code, get 10% off. Let them know that the Chairman sent you. The next are going to be the guys over at BTPA, or best known as Bestronics. Brad and them, they have a discount code, DACHAIRS, DACHAIRS, for 10% off. They can supply you with all sorts of cabling, plugs, DC connectors, the 2.1 millimeters that I use and we all use. They have all those. If you need to make audio snakes and looms, they have all that kind of stuff, as well as they build racks and rigs and everything too. So if you're in the Chicago area, you can stop by them or give them a call. And I don't think the discount code applies to rig builds, but I know it applies to all of their supplies and everything. So use the code DACHAIRS for 10% off. Last would be the guys over at String Joy. Obviously, as musicians, we all need strings. And last time I think I talked about they sell bass strings. Just kidding.
Bass.
No, bass strings. So I see a lot of musicians with the Bass Pro Shop set, and all I can think about is says Bass Pro Shop, but oh well. They have a discount code BOARDS, BOARDS, for 10% off. If you need strings for your bass, your pet bass, or your bass, or your guitar, or multiple guitars, whatever you have, check them out. They have a subscription-based platform, as well as you can buy just single packs of strings. It kind of depends on what you need, and then they can send you multiple, a box full of strings that gets you through a week or a month or whatever, however much you gig. So check them out, stringjoy.com. Use that code BOARDS for 10% off. All right, back to you, Grant.
Love it. Thank you for that bass recommendation.
Bass.
Yeah, we need a linguist to explain that one to us. I remember MXR for a while, their slogan was live to play live, or was it live to play live, or was it live to play live? Or live to play live. We don't know.
Thank you, English language. Yeah, that's a good one.
Wins again.
Oh my gosh.
There's a comedian, this is a total side, there's a comedian, I can't remember his name, but he basically just goes through English words. Is like, I'm trying to remember, but he basically would do something like, this is how you say the word moose. And then he'd find another word with 2 O's, an S and an E. And then it was a totally different pronunciation. And he would just go through over and over. It was very, very funny. You had to be there. So let's talk about some of the characteristics. This is beneficial, I think, both for us as manufacturers. This is a code I would love to be able to crack and get better and better at, as far as how do I release a product and have it still be relevant in 10 years, 30 years, 50 years. But also for the consumer, no one wants to buy a pedal. At least I hope not. No one wants to buy a pedal that is great for this week, but then no one cares about 3 months, 6 months down the road. We want stuff that we can invest in and build our sound around and have it be a creative tool for us for years to come. And it's hard to do if it's, something that looks great in the marketing, but doesn't actually deliver the way you would hope when you actually get it. So I have a list of a few things that I think contributes to staying power for a pedal or a piece of gear. Some of my top on the list, I feel like looking at the list, even some of the Boss stuff as being the most prevalent example of something that can stay around for 40 to 50 years and still be on a top 10, top 20 list. I feel like a piece of gear, a pedal, needs to be relevant and usable across multiple genres. So for me, believe it or not, guys, I used to be into much heavier music than I am now. And now polka. I love I know, right? Polka Same. Is now my genre of choice. I now really appreciate a lot more country guitar players that are playing much cleaner tones than what I was listening to 15, 20 years ago. And so my tastes have changed, but some of the gear I use is still very much the same. Like a TS9 style pedal, I could incorporate into heavier sounds back in the day, and I could still incorporate into some of the cleaner guitar sounds I use now. And so relevant across genres, I think, is important. The company has to have a track record, and we don't see too many brands, let's call them, or brand new companies on these lists. These are typically pedals coming from companies that have a track record of 5, 10 plus years. Mm-hmm. One of the examples, which is kind of a horrible example, but I was looking at the Dream as an example. UA has not made guitar pedals beyond or before 2022, but UA as a company that has done plugins and great sounding algorithms, they've been around much longer than that. So it was a natural progression, but they would be new in the guitar pedal space as far as hardware. And so that was my one, maybe, but not really. Another common thing is that most, not all, most of these pedals are affordable, sub $250. The Behringer being a really, best-selling on Sweetwater's list of all time, being $29. So a lot of these combine a simpler offering. So an SD1 is a simple overdrive, but it's also affordable and can be because it's a little bit simpler. That's obviously not a sweeping statement, but applies to quite a few of those on the list. They're endorsed across multiple genres, so multiple people across multiple bands and band types and genres and all that use these pedals. And then for the most part, again, they're an individual effect. So multi-effects are harder to have staying power over longer periods of time because they typically
and seems to be overwhelmingly distortion or overdrive.
Yeah.
And may I point out 3 knobs.
Yeah. Yep. Also true. Yeah. So, that's my list. Would you guys disagree with any of those? Let's start there. Would you knock anything off of my list of multiple genres, track record, affordable, endorsed by artists across multiple genres, and a simpler effect?
No, I would agree. I think there's, for at least, I mean, for me in the worship market of playing and stuff, you'll see like when you see, how do I put it? Okay, so Nigel, when we had Nigel, you saw a lot of Noah delays 15 years ago when I was starting to play, because it was a very staple delay pedal for a player in that genre. So you'll, like you just said, there's a longevity of some of these pedals on who endorses them. Now you switch to the timeline. Now you see way more timelines and big skies and those kind of things and those kind of genres. But I also think that because, like, with everything going up financially for a lot of stuff right now with the economy and whatnot, a lot of people also will look at just like the pros and cons to like buying an Eventide H90 versus buying the Eventide solo pedals of the black hole or whatever, these like single pedals. They're like, well, for an extra whatever, like you'll see like back me, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the pedal I want. I'll drop $200 on it. But now it's like, okay, well, for an extra $172.06, I can get this upgraded pedal that gives me more options, but I can use it, I can use it in higher gain way. I can use it in a cleaner way. Like, I think the more options, like you said, the more options to use that pedal in different ways, the less limiting and the more options people can purchase it. So I don't agree. I think your list is good.
Thank you, Brian. Mason, any disagreements or anything you would add to a pedal that has staying power for decades to come?
Well, I think it's interesting that a lot of the effects on there sort of predated the style of like internet marketing that exists now. Like if we're talking about, let's say the concentration of the top 10. Whereas now the trend, certainly in looking at differences between 2002 and 2003, and I suspect if we went back, into the 20 teens, that the standard for pedal releases now has become, somewhat along the lines of what KDH had indicated when he came on the podcast, which is like, you own YouTube for a day, you own Instagram for a day, or maybe longer, depending on the budget of the brand, maybe a week. You do this massive flood, you get everybody interested, you sell a lot of pedals in a short time, and then the momentum shifts to something else. And I understand from the perspective of the brands that they, if you have a really high payroll and you have a lot of mouths to feed metaphorically at the company, having new releases is a great way to keep everything topped up, because you are guaranteed that you're going to get a minimum amount of buy-in from your dealerships if you have a decent size network. I think that the consequence of that, though, is, and I've said this before, is like you are throwing spaghetti at the wall and you're just seeing what sticks. And I don't know how deliberate or how strategic of a move that is. And I think you're also training your customer to just try to get the next thing. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. I just don't have a lot of respect for the way that I do things for that style. Like, I really love that Greer is on that list, because I don't see him doing that. He doesn't come out with a ton of pedals. He tries to make great sounding things, and he's putting and there wasn't a huge marketing campaign behind the Lightspeed. It was mostly grassroots. Guys used it, they liked it, they talked about it, and they kept using it. And that was the best endorsement of that product. And that's not saying that people are at fault for using a nice marketing campaign. I think that that's great, but I really think it's important to have that balance with, I'm putting on a product that I'm willing to support for years to come, not just in this 90-day window for release. And that seems to be more the trend. I am disappointed in that trend. I think brands could do better. And I think that although that's what it is at the moment, I think you're actually setting yourself up down the road for a failure, like brand wide, because that's not a sustainable path, I don't think. And I think that you can't just keep on being, the boy who cried tone, so to speak, because it's just desensitizing over time. And so this is my caution to brands out there, from my perspective.
Because I was gonna say, like, there's a marketing guy I listen to a lot and really like, and he talks about putting in units of time way beyond your competitors. As in, as an example, I might spend 4 hours writing a blog, and he would spend 150 rewriting, paring it down, reading level of a third grader type thing, and he'd put in all this time. The end result is you put in more effort up front, but you have a longer shelf life for what you do for years to come, because you've put so much more into it. But I'm looking at this list thing, well, maybe that's what the manufacturers are doing, but some of these pedals, like, this stuff is not rushed in the sense of it's not a bad pedal. Some of this stuff just doesn't stick around, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe more what you're saying, Mason, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, is that maybe they are thinking of, how can we release this so we'll sell a lot of units up front? Like, what would be a cool marketing tactic, and then work backwards to the product from there, rather than let's create a product that is still relevant from the beginning. This is our goal, 10 years from now. But I mean, I look at, the microcosm. I don't know if that'll be around in 10 years as a super relevant product. It may be, but I'd be surprised. A great product. And again, we're kind of picking on the microcosm a bit, but great product, but it's not the Boss DS1. It's not this simple 3-knob overdrive that is relevant to a whole bunch of people. But I'm just curious, what would a company, in your opinion, Mason, what would a company like Hologram do and maybe this is a bad example, pick a new one if it is, but what would Hologram do to make a product that is going to be here at 2035, still a relevant product over 10 years from now?
I don't know that necessarily they're doing anything wrong. I don't think that they're in the category of companies that just release stuff to release stuff. I think that their recent, I could be wrong because I'm not following them really deliberately or intently, but they have their Chroma
console.
Yeah. I don't think that I think that that's the first release that they've had since the latest release of the microcosm. So I don't think that they're just putting stuff out, in with the technology and the design chops that it is required to build something like that. They can't afford to do something like that. Like Eventide can't afford to do stuff like that. That's why you see, they don't, there was almost a 10-year gap between the H9 and the H90, and they did release some of those smaller, kind of like the Brig equivalent to the Brigadier or the Cloudburst equivalent to the Big Sky. They released kind of little vignettes of specific algorithms that were in some of those devices. But I don't think that, those companies, the design, arc can be years. They can't afford to do a 30-day or a 90-day sort of marketing push and then just go radio silent. They can't do that.
Yeah.
The companies that are typically doing that are companies that have a repeatable infrastructure where they can just take an algorithm and plug it into the same type of box and they change the look and it's a different
UA.
That could be an example. Although, I think it's an oversimplification to say that it's that way across the board, because I think that there you could certainly poke holes in my argument. But I think UA is a little bit different in that, they had developed a framework in an audience for their brand separately from pedals. Yep. So when they adopted pedals and basically took the existing framework of their plugins and just put them into pedals, it certainly, I don't know this for a fact, but I would think that the arc was more about how to design the hardware than how it was to design the software, which is generally the shorter design period of time. Whereas somebody like, the Chroma Microcosm, I mean, they were designing everything from zero. They were coming up with their software, they were coming up with their hardware, enclosure designs, mechanical stuff. They had to do everything from A to Z. They hadn't any pre-established stuff. So that would be considerably harder. But I'm just thinking about like in terms of like the overdrives or like, just like stuff like that you see that just kind of comes in and out, in a year over year, and that they're different trends and stuff like that. Like that's especially if it's something that is already established in the marketplace pretty well. It's hard to be super original in that category. And sometimes it's just about offering a cool feature, stuff like that. So anyway, I mean, I just, from my perspective, seeing a Greer, I have a lot of respect for that. I have less respect for just like, this was a 90-day push. We sold a bunch of pedals, and then we like don't really have any intent to ever stand behind this thing long term because we're moving on to the next bright shiny object.
Yeah.
So there it is. Get off my lawn.
So, I mean, last thing I wanted to touch on is, I guess, advice for the buyer, the end user, the guitar player that's going to be getting this stuff. It would seem that maybe it takes a little bit of restraint. I'm speaking to myself here. Takes a little bit of restraint of actually asking yourself, why am I buying this? Is it because the faders move by themselves, or is it because I actually see a place for this in my rig in 5 years? I think 5 years is a huge stretch from what us guitar players normally do. Even 1 year from now, am I really going to be using this, and why? And then making a purchasing decision after that. And I think if all of us can shift towards purchasing gear that actually will have a shelf life on our board for 365 days plus, I think everything benefits. We'll get to know our tone better. We won't be always having to learn these new pedals and focusing on tweaking pedals rather than playing guitar. And I think everything kind of just benefits. If you can have a pedal board filled with pedals that are kind of like your old favorite sweater, and you just know them. You know where the knobs need to be. You know what sounds you're going to get. You know where it belongs in your signal chain. Getting a new overdrive, you're going to have to test where the best spot is in your signal chain. That's more time. Mm-hmm. It's not a bad thing. I love
where
doing
the bodies are buried on your pedal board.
Exactly.
Well, and I actually did a board build for a guy about 7-8 years ago. And I recently
he buried his pedal board in the backyard.
He did. He buried it. It's dead. And I came across his social media, and I was like, I saw the photo, and it was posted like 2 days ago. And I was like, man, like, you haven't changed a thing on the board in almost
good for
8 years. It had the timeline, the big sky, a couple, like, literally nothing was changed. I've never had it come back in for like work or anything. And I was like, you just stop playing? He goes, no, I play all the time. He goes, I also have a full-time job and I still play. I'm like, okay, I gotta know, how did you do that? How are you still reusing everything the same from 8 years ago? He's like, I got the tone I wanted. I love the tone I have. And instead of buying the next new thing because I'm bored, because let's be honest, a lot of times we all kind of just get bored of gear and we want to switch it out. But he was like, I started upgrading other things I needed. I started investing in getting like a proper cable loom to run my cables back to the amp, or I upgraded my in-ear molds and I went from like the really basic like ones you get from Guitar Center, and I got molded ones. He was like, instead of just buying new gear and switching out gear, because as you said, it's a pain to figure out where that overdrive sounds best. Like, he figured out exactly how his Kingatone and his Superbolt sounded great together. Like just something like that, and his compressor. Like, he started just upgrading other things, and then he started investing in other stuff, like getting a little setup so he could record his live playing and he'll listen to it and make videos and stuff. So it was an interesting take for him to go, yeah, once I figured out that, instead of just completely changing it, getting the H90 instead of the Big Sky or whatever, getting this or whatever, like take away that hassle and just start upgrading your other stuff. Get a upgrade your case or upgrade your cable loom or your ears or whatever you're doing. It was really interesting take to hear him talk about that. Which
is it appropriate to reveal his first name?
I can't remember. I mean,
it's fine.
I can't.
If you're listening, we'll
name.
Call him John. John is a safe guess.
Yeah, I don't
John,
know.
if
His
you were listening,
username was something. I can't remember it.
I am applauding you and your self-control. I think you are a lighthouse for the rest of us to follow.
Yeah.
Thank you, John, or whatever your first name is. That's awesome, man. 7 or 8 years without a significant change. That's amazing.
Yeah. I had a friend growing up that was like that. We were all in a band together, and he's a talented musician. He went to Hillsong. He was like the lead singer in our band, and he just kind of had that he had that natural talent for playing guitar, and he didn't really care much about gear. Like it was just kind of his whatever, but he was the same way. I got the tone I wanted. I got the guitar, one guitar going into his Bad Cat amp. He has like a double cut Black Falcon or something with like some, like no switcher, no nothing. And he's like, it works. It sounds great. I'm happy with it. So why fuss? And so he learned how to mix and master, from a recording. So that kind of stuff. So yeah, no, it's possible. It's just, it's not for me. I get bored easily and sort stuff out.
Well, guys, I don't have anything else I want to cover. Do you have any final thoughts before we hop back in the Miata for the day and carry on through into 2024?
I can't think of it.
I got my footstool out and I'm ready to hop up on the trunk.
A raised Miata.
Yeah.
Does the Miata, is it run on like vegetable oil too? Are we doing
I'm sure it has all of the best things. Yes, all of the things. Knobbly tires today were raised 2 feet off the ground so we can go 4x4ing.
Top down.
But that's it for today, guys. Best pedals of 2022 and 2023 and staying power for the gear that you buy. Let us know what we missed. I'm actually curious in the comments, if you're on YouTube, what you would add to what makes a pedal last. What will make it relevant in 10 to 20 years from now? Because by no means did we come up with a comprehensive list today. But yeah, that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much. We will see you next week on the next episode of Chairman of the Boards.
See you guys.